Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Sports Mole's Football Shorts. I'm Barney Corkhill. I'm here with our football editor Matt Law, and we're here to talk about game week 23 of the Premier League season and our predictions for it. We'll get straight into it with Aston Villa versus Arsenal, Matt. Both coming into this match on the back of disappointing results in midweek. Aston Villa a home defeat against West Ham, and Arsenal losing away to Wolves, having two men sent off in that game as well. Really disappointing that result for them. That is, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting game, isn't it? The Arsenal game. I mean, to be fair to Arsenal, they started excellently, didn't they? I think Saka hit the post early on, didn't they? Managed to take the league through Pepe, and at that stage, could only really see one result. You know, Arsenal going on and winning the game. But Wolves were not very good at all in the first half hour or so. But as you know, games can change on moments, and obviously the David Luiz red card, and I mean. Everyone was a bit confused, weren't they, at the time, the double jeopardy rule about, you're better off hacking at the ball and trying to win the ball, because at least maybe then you'd get a yellow card rather than getting sent off. And obviously sent off, then it's a penalty, then they score at that stage, and it's always going to be difficult in the second half, and Wolves go and get the other goal. And from being in a position where they're incredibly comfortable, Arsenal end up finishing the game with 9 men. Another quite a strange decision. You see goalkeepers come out quite a lot, don't you? But Leno, but he's gone with his hand, and there was no real complaints. Looks like Renarson might be in goal for this game, doesn't it? Obviously, they signed. They made the goalie from Matt Ryan, wasn't it, from Brighton? Yeah. His fitness is. I'm not sure whether he will be available for this game. So it might be Renarson, and they're not really sure on him. You can tell they're not sure on Renarson whether he's going to be good enough. But yeah, Villa on the other hand,
He wasn't included in Europa League squad, was he? So yeah, they've obviously
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think he's probably been gone down to number 3, isn't he, now in the pecking order behind, obviously, Ryan. But yeah, Villa. I was surprised at the Villa game as well. West Ham. I thought, obviously, a lot of talk around, Jesse Lingard getting a double for West Ham, but I thought Villa were not very good at all. Ollie Watkins on the score sheet made it 2-1. You fancy they might, push late on for something, but not very good from Villa. Their form, they won 2 of their last 4 in the Premier League. I think they've lost 5 of their last 7 in all competitions, which, think about it like that, not very good for a side that, they're still having a fantastic season. They're up in 9th, in and around, only a point behind Tottenham with a game in hand. And like I said, if they could finish top 10 this season, Villa, I think they'd have a great season. Arsenal, obviously, a point behind Villa in 10th, but played 2 games more. So, yeah, it's a really big game, an interesting one. Obviously, players missing for Arsenal again, obviously suspensions and injuries, and Villa are looking okay. I just think it'll be a tight game. Almost went Villa, but Villa's home form can be a little bit dodgy, can't they? And recent form's not been great, and Arsenal have improved. There's no doubt about that. So I've just gone 1-1 here.
Well, yeah, I've actually gone for Arsenal. This is one I went back and forth on. I think Villa's just form at the moment is very patchy. They've got those wins over Newcastle and Southampton recently, but as you mentioned, if you go a bit further back, even into to the start of the year, their overall form, and obviously they have had problems with coronavirus and things like that. But even since coming back from that after that long stoppage, they're not really finding the level of consistency they had before, and they are capable of losing those games, as we saw against West Ham 3-1. You just look at the league table to see how these two teams' seasons have gone so far. Aston Villa will be a lot happier with how their season has gone so far than Arsenal will be with how theirs has gone. As you mentioned, Arsenal behind Aston Villa in the table, having played 2 games more. They never would have expected that at the start of the season. So it does need to be kept in context, these sorts of struggles Villa are going through at the moment. But the form both teams are in at the moment, I think Arsenal certainly in much better form. Obviously, the Wolves defeat was a bit of a blip, but you've got to take into account the fact that they went down to 9 men in that game. And as you say, were much the better team before David Luiz got sent off. Personally, I think that I can't believe that really hasn't got overturned, and I couldn't really believe it was a red card in the first place. I think it should have been a penalty, even though it was a little harsh on David Luiz. I think he didn't mean to clip him, but he did clip him, accidental or not. He did clip him and prevent him a goal-scoring chance. So whether it was an accident or not, I think it was a penalty. But to be sent off for that, when, as you say, he could have actually tried to hack him down and made it look like he was going for the ball, and he wouldn't have been sent off. There's obviously a bit of discrepancy in the rule there. And I know why that rule has been brought into play, but that's the sort of scenario where just common sense needs to be used. And I don't feel common sense is being used in football at the moment. Now VAR's come in, it's just got rid of all common sense. And I think that was just another example of it. There was a lot of examples of it in midweek, and that was one of them. But I think obviously those red cards did contribute hugely to that defeat. Arsenal won't be expecting to be in a similar situation against Aston Villa. So for that reason, I think I'm just backing them to win this one 2-1. It should be a close game, though. On Saturday at 3 p.m, we've got Burnley versus Brighton. This is a game towards the bottom of the table, but Brighton in superb form now at the moment. 4 wins from their last 5 games across all competitions. The last 2 Premier League games, they've beaten Tottenham and Liverpool, both 1-0 apiece. Kept 4 clean sheets in the top flight in a row for the first time in their history, I think it is. So they're absolutely flying at the moment, and they've moved, 10 points clear of the relegation zone. Really, really eased their concerns, and they'll be beginning to breathe a little bit easier now. Finally getting the rewards from playing some pretty good football, which they've done all season. Burnley, by contrast, have lost their last 2-0 against Chelsea and Manchester City, but difficult games, those two, after a recent resurgence. Obviously, Burnley recently beat Liverpool at Anfield, just as Brighton did. So how do you see this one going?
Yes, again, and another interesting game. I think Burnley. I think obviously the defeat against City last time out was disappointing, but the amount of players that they had. Burnley are not a team that can lose 3 or 4 of their better players and really put in the same level of performance. Look at the players that were out of that game. Chris Wood, Brady, even Brownhill in midfield. I think he's had a really good season. Obviously Ashley Barnes as well. Taylor's played well at left back. So they're 5 really important players for Burnley, and the players that are coming in are just not as, obviously haven't got the same quality. And to lose at home to City, it's no shame, because City are absolutely flying at the moment. I think Burnley have, obviously there's still a gap, isn't there? They're 17th now, 8 points above the bottom 3. Who are the bottom 3 are slightly maybe getting a little bit cut adrift now. Fulham are struggling to win, but yeah, as you say, Brighton have really completely eased their concerns. I still thought they were in a bit of trouble a little while ago. They were struggling to pick up results, but the win over Tottenham was obviously very impressive, and then the win over Liverpool was nice to see. Obviously not from your point of view, but it was nice for non-Liverpool fans and obviously Brighton fans as well. And they were good value, to be honest, in that game. Brighton, I thought they, Dan Burn was instrumental in what they were doing. Obviously it was a scrappy goal, if you like, in the box. Alzate getting the goal, but I said it for a while now. You look at Brighton's team; it is a team full of quality, and I always said if they were to go down, they'd have their players plucked out of that club. Look at the back 3: White, Dunk, Webster, all good players. Bissouma in midfield has been linked with the biggest clubs in the world, and obviously Maupay and Trossard did quality. McAllister was didn't play in that game; he was out, and obviously Lamptey, a player that's out at the moment, a right back who's had a great season. So I think Brighton will be absolutely fine now. I think obviously the run they've been on. It's a tight one, isn't it? A few weeks ago, I might have leaned towards a draw in this game, but I just think Burnley's injury situation is there at the moment. Looks like they'll be missing, a couple more again at least for this game. And Brighton, let's say, will be absolutely flying. Graham Potter's got the luxury of potentially making a couple of changes if he does want to freshen it up after obviously tough game at Anfield. And yeah, the pressure's just off Brighton at the moment. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll go into this full of confidence. I actually expect them to win. I think Burnley will unfortunately suffer another defeat. I've gone 1-0 Brighton.
Yeah, I've gone exactly the same. I think the form they're in at the moment, it's difficult to back against them in a game like this. It will be interesting to see if they can keep that sort of form up and that level of performance up in the upcoming games, which perhaps they're going to with more hope. They wouldn't have expected certainly 6 points from those games against Tottenham and Liverpool. So those would be almost viewed as bonus points, almost free hits, with the pressure off going into those games. Whereas games against Burnley, even Aston Villa coming up, and then at home to Crystal Palace and then West Brom. Those are sorts of games they would have been looked at beforehand, probably a few weeks ago now, and looked at them and thought, all right, we can get some serious points there and they'll really boost our relegation battle. So it's a slightly different proposition for them going into those games than it was against Tottenham, Liverpool, where not much was expected of them, and obviously they came away with those wins. But having said that, those wins do take the pressure off these upcoming games. So if they can also view them as almost free hits, and certainly they would have taken confidence from the fact of beating Tottenham and Liverpool back to back, I think they'll fully believe that they can come out and, there's nothing to say they can't even win those next 4 games, which would be an incredible run to go on. And then we know how tight the table is at the moment. They could be right up towards the top half suddenly if they can do that. So the form they're in is really good. If they can keep that up, it's just they might already consider themselves well on the path to safety now after those 2 wins, but a few more good results will put them there. And we're both backing them to get one of those here with 1-0 victories. Also at 3 p.m. on Saturday, we've got Newcastle versus Southampton. Newcastle, they beat Everton recently at Goodison Park, but then back to losing ways against Crystal Palace. Steve Bruce said he was pretty pleased with the performance in that, but the results still aren't really bearing fruit, still towards the bottom of the form table. But Southampton, I mean, they're a team in pretty awful form as well. 3 defeats in a row, and obviously that last one was the 9-0 against Manchester United. It's 4 defeats in a row in the Premier League alone, only scoring 1 goal in that time. But that 9-0 against Manchester United, I'm sure you'll talk about the Man United aspect of that a little bit later when we come to talk about them. But for Southampton, it was just an embarrassing collapse, really. Not much more could have gone wrong for them, but, there are ways to lose. And all right, you lose a player on his debut in the first 2 minutes. There was no complaints whatsoever about losing him to the red card. But there were ways to lose, and they just collapsed. And some of the defending in there was just horrendous. That almost every cross that went into the box, United had a free header and could knock it inside for a chance or a goal. Some of the 9 goals United scored in that game were just incredibly easy. You never expect to see that really in the Premier League. And I think that will be the most disappointing thing for Ralph Hasenhüttl. Obviously, the good news to emerge from that game now is that Jan Bednarek's suspension has been overturned, so he will have him, which helps to ease their absentee worries a little bit, because without him they could have had 11 players missing for this game through injury and suspension. Still got 10, so they've obviously still been pretty badly ravaged by injuries and things like that. So you have to take that into account. But there is really no excuse for a 9-0 defeat, and for that to happen 2 seasons in a row. I think, the flip side of that, in a perverse way, they know they can bounce back from this, because it happened against Leicester. And when it happened against Leicester last season, they were in a much worse position, both as a club and in terms of the league table, than they are now. So they're building off much better foundations now, I think, to recover from such a bad defeat. Obviously, it's never ever good to lose 9-0, but I think they've proved that they can come back from it. They know they've got the character and the personnel to come back from it. So they'll just have to, regroup, take it on the chin, that one, and then try and return to winning ways. On paper, this is a decent game for them to return for winning ways. Another one this is, I went back and forth on. I think Newcastle have certainly shown more signs in recent weeks of being able to pick up results. So it wouldn't surprise me for them. It wouldn't surprise me if they go and win this game. Southampton, they'll be demanding a reaction, but it's just so hard to back a team that has lost their last 4 and lost their last one 9-0. So in the end, I sat on the fence with this one and went for 1-1.
1-1, yeah. I've gone goalless here. I've gone 0-0, which obviously might be a bit of a surprise to back after a team getting beat 9-0. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying about. There seems to be this strange thing that I've read, like, just because Southampton went down to 10 men, that explains why they got blown away. But you see it, hundreds of thousands of times before. A team goes down to 10 men, and they can be very, very difficult to beat. And that's what Southampton could have been. Obviously, it was 9 men late on, but I think was it 6-0 at the time that they went down to 9 men. So it's not like it's not like they were playing with 9 men for an hour of the game. It was a very, very late period, and the game was obviously gone by that time. But yeah, some of the goals that they conceded, the defending was terrible, and obviously Janowicz had got sent off. Obviously, he's taken a lot of criticism. I think it's harsh to dig him out, because he's not done it on purpose. Because people say there's always this weird thing of like, oh, he's not done it on purpose. Obviously, he hasn't, because he's not gone in to get sent off. A minute into his debut appearance at Old Trafford, it's obviously very unfortunate. It was a terrible challenge, and he deserved to be sent off. But he needs to move on from that. The club need to move on, but. Yeah, I thought it was a very bizarre performance from Southampton. They didn't need to say the defending was horrible at times, and United didn't even really need to be amazingly good. I've seen them play better this season than United, and not win 9-0, so that says a lot. But yeah, Newcastle, the Palace game, again, it was a one that I didn't really. I think I back to a draw in that game. I didn't expect them to get beat there. Obviously, it took the lead with a really good strike from Shelvey early on, good equaliser from Palace as well, and then a Cahill header, which ended up winning the game. And again, it's one of those things that, Shelvey's chipped in with a goal, but if Wilson doesn't score, you're looking at around the team, who else is really going to get a goal? Fraser, Almiron doesn't really score too many, Hayden, Hendrick. You're relying on, Shelvey will come up with goals occasionally, but it's Wilson or you're struggling really, and that's been the story of Newcastle this season, sit down in 16th now. Obviously, Palace 3 places above them, and I think there is the fact that there is a little bit of a gap now between the bottom 3. The bottom 3 are in danger of getting cut adrift, and the fact that Fulham have been struggling to win. Obviously, West Brom, Sheffield United. The fact that Sheffield United beat West Brom is good for the teams sitting above the relegation zone, because it tightens them up and opens the gap up above them. So I just think both sides will be really keen not to get beat in this game. I think Southampton will be really, maybe a bit rigid and try and just edge out a narrow win. But Newcastle, they certainly deserve respect, and I do think they can be difficult to beat. picked up a point against Liverpool, didn't they, at home not that long ago? So,
Mm.
yeah, it's just goalless here, 0-0.
Goalless, yeah. Also on that Southampton game, I know it didn't obviously have any impact on the scoreline, but VAR again in the spotlight for,
Yeah.
I think that disallowed Che Adams' goal. I've looked at
Oh.
it hundreds of times and cannot see how that has been disallowed or how we've got to this stage where that is deemed offside. And also, obviously, there was a lot of talk over the Jan Bednarek red card, similar to the Louise one, or whether it was even a penalty. But again, VAR just, I'm growing to dislike it more and more each week. And those are another two examples of why. Also at 3 p.m., at 5:30 p.m. on Saturday, you mentioned Fulham briefly. They're potentially getting cut adrift at the bottom. They've got a difficult assignment in the London derby against a really in-form West Ham side. I think they've only lost once since the turn of the year, and they've won 5 of their 6 games in the Premier League. So in really good form, up to 5th, only 2 points off Liverpool, could jump into the top 4 for at least 24 hours with a victory here. Are you backing them to get it? Fulham in pretty poor form. Again, lost to Leicester in midweek.
Yeah, I've gone West Ham here. I've gone narrow. I've gone 2-1 West Ham. I just think Fulham, I've maybe backed them to get stuff recently when maybe I shouldn't have done, but just because I thought they went through a period, but they were playing quite well. But recently, I think the Leicester result. I mean, losing at home to Leicester. Leicester, obviously, having a great season, but I did think it was a little bit. It was just a poor performance. And the games before that, drawing with West Brom and Brighton, again, I didn't think they were terrible results. But when you look at it, it's all very well saying, oh, you're going to pick up a point here, there. But when the winless run goes on for so long and you're sitting in that position of the table, I mean, end of November, I think it was, isn't it, their last win in the Premier League, which is an awfully long time. Now the gap, as we say, is 8 points. And they've not even got a game in hand over Burnley now. Fulham had a game in hand for a while. Obviously, they have over Newcastle, who have also got 22 points. But I just think they're running out of time a little bit. West Ham's performance, obviously, Jesse Lingard coming in on his debut and getting a couple of goals. And I do think it'll be a really good signing for West Ham. I said it, David Moyes knows him well. He's obviously might feel like he's got a bit of a point to prove to people that, have doubted him. He's obviously gone through some troubles in his personal life, but a really good signing for West Ham, who as we say, absolutely flying. I think another player that's been great as well, Thomas Souček this season, 8 Premier League goals from 22 games has been, what a signing he has been for them. Didn't pay massive money for him. I think, between 10 and 15 million, something like that, they are signing for permanently, and a player that's, 25 years of age. I think they'll struggle to keep him because I think he's a really, really good player. And as you say, West Ham will be eyeing that top 4. Liverpool losing was great for West Ham, and it's a really tough game. I did almost go draw here. I just thought, as we know, Fulham do like to draw games. They've drawn 8 this season, which is fairly high, especially for a team towards the bottom. You expect to lose more and maybe pick up a couple more wins. Only 2 wins all season. It's just not good enough for Fulham. And West Ham, on the other hand, are, as you say, 11 Premier League wins, even half their Premier League games for a side that, maybe many tipped to struggle this season. That have been fantastic. They're defending well. They're a threat on the counter, and they can play good football as well. So, yeah, I think it'd be a tight game, but West Ham 2-1.
Yeah, West Ham have won as many games as Liverpool this season.
I
did. I've gone for West Ham in this one as well. I've gone for 2-0. I did the preview for this one. There was a few interesting stats to emerge, but like Fulham have only scored 1 goal in the last 5 home games. As you say, the points against Brighton and West Brom, you look at them and they're not dreadful points. Obviously, better not to lose those games. And their overall run, they're on the longest winless run in the Premier League at the moment of 11 games, but 7 of those have been draws. So they are picking up points on a fairly regular basis. But as you say, the likes of Brighton above them are picking up points, picking up wins here and there. Obviously, Brighton picking up wins regularly now. But Newcastle and Burnley have also picked up wins here and there. And that's what's seen the gap grow to what it is. And they do need to turning those draws into victories now. If they're to close that gap, draws won't be enough from now on. And those games against the likes of Brighton and West Brom, which they drew away from home, not awful results on the face of them, but those are the games they really need to start winning. West Ham is obviously a different proposition, the sort of form West Ham are in at the moment, but West Ham are enjoying one of their best seasons in 30 odd years. More than that, it's an incredible campaign they're enjoying at the moment. I've just gone for 2-0 in this one. I can see them coming away with a victory, and they'll really fancy their chances. They're flying high. I think it was big for them to respond to that Liverpool defeat when they were really disappointing with a win, and a good win as well, away at Aston Villa. We know how dangerous Aston Villa can be. But West Ham have got those those sorts of players who can win those games, and to be facing Fulham and Sheffield United in the next two, obviously two teams in the relegation zone. They'll be expecting another 6 points probably from those two games, and then they're right up there still in the European battle. So confidence will grow. Obviously their run after that does get a bit tougher, but in these next two games, next two league games, they'll certainly fancy the chances of keeping the pressure on the top four. So we're both backing them to do that with away victories at Craven Cottage this weekend. 8 p.m. on Saturday, we've got Man United versus Everton. Everton returned to winning ways with a 2-1 win over Leeds. Manchester United, obviously, we mentioned that 9-0 win over Southampton. I'll let you talk about that and the performance and the ruthlessness, really, of Man United in that game. There were two teams in very similar form. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a really tough game, isn't it, for United? Obviously tough for Everton as well. But yeah, the 9-0, I think interesting thing about that, when United beat Ipswich 9-0 is the one, obviously, we spoke about. Andy Cole got 5 in that game. And when you win 9-0, you always expect, if you hadn't seen the score sheet, you'd think, maybe Cavani has got 4, maybe someone's got 4 in that game. But the fact there were so many different goal scorers, obviously Martial got 2, but apart from that, obviously an own goal as well. But to see lots of different players get on the score sheet, I thought it was pleasing. Obviously, the fullbacks were really good. It's as good as I've seen Wan-Bissaka going forward this season, because it's been somewhere he obviously needs to improve. Luke Shaw, for me, there's not a better left-back in the Premier League at the moment than Luke Shaw. He's been absolutely unbelievable. And the fact he got taken off at half-time just shows how important he is. Obviously, he'll start this game. The Cavani one's interesting. I read your preview. You did the preview for this one, didn't you?
Yeah.
I didn't copy your score. Maybe I have, but not for that reason. But yeah, the Cavani one's obviously interesting because, he came off of that slight, kick to the ankle with the penalty incident that didn't get given. But it'd be interesting to see whether he comes back in, because he's obviously so important for United at the moment. But obviously the games are coming thick and fast, aren't they? United played West Ham in the FA Cup, which is obviously a game they'll be really, really keen to win on the 9th. So it'd be interesting to see what the team selection is for that game. Obviously, they weren't underestimating Everton's side that, are very dangerous. And I think Everton's win over Leeds was, really big, especially coming in off the back of the home defeat to Newcastle, which was, really, really disappointing. And to go and win at Leeds, Leeds were obviously in really good confidence. I think was obviously really good for them. Calvert-Lewin getting his name on the score sheet. Sigurdsson, wasn't sure about some of the defending from Leeds in that game, especially the first goal. Obviously, it was a really good cross from Luka Dean, but not really sure why he was free inside the box. But, it puts Everton, 7th at the moment, 11 points with Chelsea, 2 games in hand over Chelsea, and obviously 4 points behind Liverpool with 2 games in hand. So, Everton are really sitting well at the moment. They've got a good opportunity to certainly, I think they'll finish top 6, top 7 this season. I don't think they've got enough to push into the top 4 because I think they're too inconsistent. But yeah, similarly, team selection for Everton, obviously Jordan Pickford didn't play, did he? Interesting to see whether he comes back into the side. Obviously, got options going forward. Josh King, a player that's come to the club, obviously knows United well. United tried to sign him last January before they got Ighalo in. So, yeah, I said the Southampton game was dangerous. It didn't turn out to be dangerous, but this is definitely a dangerous game for United. Obviously, it was a huge win, especially after the Arsenal draw, the Sheffield United defeat. They're obviously 3 points behind City. City got a game in hand, but 2 points above Leicester, 4 points above Liverpool on the same game. So that's a nice cushion to have at this stage. And obviously, expect, obviously Liverpool got a really tough game, as we'll speak about. Leicester got a tough game, a relatively tough game at Wolves as well this weekend. So if United were to win, it could potentially open up a little bit more of an advantage, which is what they need. But yeah, it's a really tough game. United, Everton recently, record's pretty good. I think the last time Everton won at Old Trafford was back in 2013. So, they're pretty good record over the Toffees in terms of, recent Premier League games and a League Cup game, beating them earlier this season, 3-1 at Goodison Park as well. So was 1-1 last season at Old Trafford though. So it's a very, very tough game. I've actually gone what you predicted, 2-1, which is what I went for Southampton, but it didn't turn out to be that. But yeah, I think this will be really tight. But United, good confidence, need to win, and I think they will, 2-1.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, I've gone for 2-1 as well. Everton's record at Old Trafford is it's actually awful. I think it's that win in 2013-14, which was Moyes' season in charge of United, is their only win, I think, in 27 visits to Old Trafford in the Premier League since 1992. So, yeah, United usually get the better of Everton. Obviously, the majority of that time was when United were the best team in the land with Sir Alex Ferguson in charge, obviously. But even recently, they've kept up their dominance over Everton. home and away, to be honest, for the most part. But at Old Trafford, Everton have really struggled to beat Manchester United. Having said that, if this game was at Goodison Park, I'd probably be even more confident of Man United win, because as we know, United's big slip-ups have come at Old Trafford this season. Everton's away form has been really good at the moment, four away wins in a row in the Premier League. If they win a fifth here, it'll be their best run since 1970. It's already their best run since 1985 away from home. And when you consider some of those great teams they had in the 80s, winning titles, challenging for cups, and everything like that, that's a really big achievement if they can manage to get a fifth win in a row on the board. The next away games come against Liverpool and Chelsea, so it's a difficult run coming up away from home for them. But yeah, they'll be arriving at Old Trafford in really good spirits, good form. They'll be delighted to have bounced back from that Newcastle defeat at the first time of asking. Ancelotti was pretty happy with his side's performance against Leeds. So they will be coming into this game full of confidence. Obviously, you mentioned United's FA Cup game. Everton have got an FA Cup game against Tottenham, two teams in really desperate to end their respective trophy droughts, those are. So that will be a pretty big game for them as well. But yeah, this one will be big for them as well. And I wouldn't be too surprised to go and see them get something from this game, maybe even a win. As I say, if it was at Goodison Park, I'd be more confident of United winning. But as you mentioned, I have predicted a United win. It's pretty impossible to back against the team who's just won 9-0, even with the circumstances that happened. And obviously you don't expect Everton to go down to 10 men in the second minute. You don't expect them to go down to 9 men. As you alluded to, we're probably expecting a similar game to what we expected from the Southampton game in terms of how difficult it will be for United, perhaps even a little bit more difficult than we were expecting before that Southampton game. But yeah, like you, I've gone for 2-1 there. I can see United winning again. On Sunday, we've got Tottenham versus West Brom. Tottenham, 3 defeats in a row now, really disappointing again against Chelsea. Pressure starting to grow on Jose Mourinho. I knew some Tottenham fans when they were top of the league who weren't happy with the playing style and wanted Jose Mourinho out. I think that pressure is just going to carry on growing because now the playing style hasn't increased and the results have got much worse, and there's not much to cheer about at Tottenham, down in 8th place in the table now, 3 points behind Everton and Chelsea, who we've just talked about. Really poor run of form for them. Having said that, they're going into a game against the West Brom side who we've already mentioned, Fulham getting cut adrift, West Brom cut even more adrift, getting beaten by Sheffield United last time out. Just a huge match that was for both teams. I think I mentioned in the build-up to that match that it's probably, those bottom three fighting amongst themselves at the moment when they need to start closing the gap on the teams above them outside the bottom three. But still, that was a huge match for both Sheffield United and West Brom. And for West Brom to go and lose that game against bottom of the table, it's just so disappointing. And now they're only 1 point off the bottom of the table themselves. It looks a lot more likely that they'll end up bottom of the pile than they will actually escape danger at the moment. And we know Sam Allardyce has got such a great record of actually getting teams out of trouble, but it's just looking harder and harder to see that happening with each passing week. They started pretty well away from home under Allardyce with that draw against Liverpool and then beating Wolves in the derby. But then the last 2 away games have been defeats to West Ham and Sheffield United, that one. And this is a difficult game. Obviously, Tottenham have got the quality to win games, even without Kane, even considering the form they're in at the moment. They need to show more of that. The second half against Liverpool was poor. The performance against Brighton was really bad. 1-0 flattered them in that game. And the performance against Chelsea, again, just lacked any real cutting edge and just frustrating for Tottenham fans to view. So West Brom, with the tactics Allardyce is capable of employing, are frustrating Tottenham. They might fancy their chances coming here and coming away with a point, but they really need victories now, West Brom, more than just draws. Even a draw will be a good result here, of course, but they need to start picking up victories. I can't see that happening here. Even with Tottenham in poor form, I can see them winning this one. I think against almost anyone else in the division right now, I might not be backing a Tottenham win necessarily, but I think West Brom is probably just about the perfect opponent for them right now. So I'm going for 2-0 to Tottenham in this one.
Yeah, I've gone 2-0 as well. I'm not surprised you've gone the same. I think they are the perfect opponent. You'd rather be playing West Brom at home than Sheffield United at home right now, because Sheffield United beat United and obviously won at the weekend. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying about the points. They play the next 2. West Brom, they play Tottenham away, Manchester United at home, and on the face of it, points in both those games would be good. But then they play Burnley, so they were to lose that, lose to Brighton, and then you're suddenly I think the fact that the gap is what it is right now, 10 points, and that's the gap to Burnley, and you expect Burnley, once they get their players back, to have enough. I expect Newcastle to have enough. I think they've got enough quality, and I'd be very, very surprised if that bottom three, didn't go down. I do, as I've said a few times, want Fulham to stay up, because I do like Fulham, but they're struggling. Obviously, Sheffield United will still, they've left it too late. They've improved, no doubt, but they've left it too late. But yeah, West Brom, obviously, in fairness, a sort of busy January transfer window that wasn't busy, overall across Europe. But obviously, Maitland-Niles, it was a really good signing from Arsenal. I think he's been promised, the opportunity to play in midfield, which is why he didn't go elsewhere. I think Leicester and Southampton were linked with him, but maybe as a fullback. He wanted to play in midfield. Obviously, he wants to get in the England squad, doesn't he, for the Euros? So it's a great signing. Jokoslu as well from Celta Vigo. I've seen little bits and bobs of him. He's a really good player. He's good on the ball. He's combative. He's got the engine, I think, to play in the Premier League. And they're going to be looking, Snodgrass and Diagnew up front. They're going to be looking for contributions. I think Sam Allardyce is saying, look, we need big contributions from the players, because I don't think Slaven Bilic was particularly underperforming. I think he was just getting what he could out of that squad, because I just don't think it's a Premier League squad. I said it a few times, it's a Championship squad, and if they were in the Championship this season, they'd probably be around the playoffs, maybe top 2, 3. I think it's a good Championship squad. I don't think it's a Premier League squad, and I think that's just the way it is. Tottenham, the Chelsea game, I think, Jose Mourinho came out after the game and he praised the spirit of his players and tried to keep morale high, which is understandable. But he said they were good in the second half against Chelsea. I don't necessarily agree. I thought they were better than they were in the first half, but that's not difficult, because the first half was, horrendous. I think Chelsea have improved, but they didn't need to do an awful lot to win the game. Obviously, without Kane, as we know, they're, not even half the team, maybe, quarter of the team. Maybe that's even being generous. They're just not. Even Son looks frustrated at the moment, doesn't he? Had that chance late on, a little bit of a sighter went over the bar. He looks a little bit frustrated, and Vinicius obviously didn't really contribute. Dyer, not sure what he's doing with the challenge with the penalty. It's a strange one. You don't see many of them where you're actually on the floor and you make the challenge and that happens. But yeah, I completely agree. Look at Tottenham in the table at the moment. They're 8th at the moment. They have got a game in hand over some of the teams behind them, but a couple of poor results and they could find themselves down in 10th, and it's difficult to pull yourself into the top 4 race. And, as you mentioned, I think it was November they were top, weren't they? Top of the league and 9 games in, really good start to the season. And you fancy that they might, edge out a title challenge this season, but it just hasn't been the case. Reguilon's a big miss. Lo Celso's a big miss in terms of, contribution in attack. So, yeah, as you mentioned, it's the perfect game for Tottenham, and I think they'll win the same as you, 2-0.
All right, both going for 2-0 wins in that one. Also on Sunday at 2 p.m, we've got Wolves versus Leicester. We mentioned Leicester flying high, now 3rd in the table after that win over Fulham, bounced back from that disappointing home defeat against Leeds. They play a Wolves side who finally returned to winning ways in the Premier League with the 2-1 win over Arsenal. Although, as we mentioned, that came after Arsenal had certainly one man sent off and then another man sent off late on. They were second best until that happened. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's normally a game, it's one of them, as we mentioned, usually you go for like a 2-2 or something in this game, but that would probably be if Wolves were, playing better. Obviously, the win over Arsenal is huge for them, but as you say, came in, fortuitous circumstances. They could have been out of that game at half-time. Arsenal were, could have been maybe 2 or 3 up in the first half hour, and then if the David Luiz challenge doesn't happen, the red card penalty changes the game. And obviously, in fairness to Wolves, you still got to go and win the game, just because you've got a man advantage, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go and win the game. You still have to go and win it against an Arsenal side who have improved. And yeah, Ruben Neves and Moutinho, 2 players that I've picked out, maybe need to offer a little bit more. They were both on the score sheet. I thought Willian Jose was bright. I think he will, contribute some goals. If he could maybe get, 5 Premier League goals before the end of the season, something like that, I think that would obviously help Wolves an awful lot. But Leicester, I think, the uncharacteristic defeat, wasn't it, at home to Leeds? I thought they were, really poor in that game. But then you've got to go and beat Fulham, and I actually backed Fulham to get something out of that game because I thought Fulham recently had been okay at home, but Leicester were good in that game. Again, it was a performance that I'd said, professional performance from a side that expects to be in around that top 4. Obviously, Iheanacho getting on the score sheet, and Justin. I think Justin this season's been fantastic for Leicester. One of the best, fullbacks in the Premier League this season. Just looks like he can do a bit of everything, and he was obviously a really good signing for them. Looks a good player. Maddison was really good in that game. Obviously, once they get Vardy back, it'll be a bigger threat. But as you mentioned, up in 3rd at the moment, and Liverpool have a tough game. United could potentially drop points, get Everton, and they'll expect to be in that top four now. Leicester, I don't think they're sort of, obviously pleased to be there, but not, feeling that they don't belong there. I do think Leicester feel like they are good enough to finish in that top four, and be very interested to see that's the case. But yeah, I think I've maybe gone a little bit ambitious here in terms of the score, and maybe a little bit harsh on Wolves, but I just think Leicester are really dangerous at the moment, and I've actually gone 3-1 Leicester here.
3-1. Oh yeah, I've gone 2-1 Leicester for similar reasons. I think the form Leicester are in, apart from that blip against Leeds, it's just impossible to ignore. And yeah, you say they belong there. I don't think there's any doubt in any mind that they have been one of the 4 best teams in the Premier League this season. Obviously, the league table says that, but not the league table can sometimes lie a little bit where a team ends up, but certainly not in terms of Leicester's case. They deserve to be right up there. They've performed really well consistently throughout much of the season. Only Man City have won more games, whereas Wolves this season, just been really disappointing after 2 really good seasons, finishing 7th, to have gone on this recent winless run. And obviously, yeah, we've mentioned it already, that Arsenal game, would they have gone and won that if it was still 11 versus 11? Probably not. It's impossible to say, obviously, but probably not. And it may be that victory, no matter how it came, is exactly what they needed to snap themselves out of the poor run of form they're in. But it's still difficult to look past that run of form which preceded it. And obviously that win stands out and was much needed, but it comes with almost an asterisk next to it in terms of how it came against 9 men in the end. So yeah, I'm backing Leicester to come out on top in this one. I've gone for 2-1. We've mentioned it a couple of times in passing, but the big one this weekend is Liverpool versus Manchester City. Obviously, champions versus the leaders now. Liverpool coming into it off the back of another really disappointing defeat against Brighton. That's back-to-back home defeats now after 69 games without one in the Premier League. 4 home games without a win for Liverpool now, which is just incredible. We never really saw that coming considering the form they were on. I think they'd won 32 of 33 home league games before that, and now 4 without a win. It's just come out of nowhere, really. Whereas Man City's form, in contrast to that, is just incredible at the moment. I think it's 13 games in a row, 1 across all competitions, which is a club record, 9-1 in a row in the Premier League. 3 points clear at the top of the table with a game in hand. All signs point to Man City going on and winning the title from this stage. For Liverpool, I think this is, if they harbour any hopes of getting back into the title race and retaining it, I think this is an absolute must-win for them. I don't think even a draw will be good enough. I think what Liverpool have been so good at in recent seasons is consistency, but this spell of form has just obviously seen that they are human. They're capable of dropping points on a regular basis again, which that hasn't really happened over the last couple of seasons. So if you're then asking Liverpool to make up a 7-point gap, probably a 10-point gap if Man City go and win their game in hand over the course of the rest of the season, it's just a huge ask when Man City are in such good form. And Man City will, of course, drop points. So if Liverpool then do go and win this game, then I think they are still back in the title race and can't be counted out completely. But I do think it would need a victory. And strangely enough, the way the 2 teams play, I'm more confident Liverpool getting a win against Man City than I would be if we were playing, Fulham or Sheffield United in this game at the moment. Our record against the bottom 6 has just been dreadful this season. And again, it's come out of nowhere. It's not new that teams pack 10 players behind the ball and we struggle to find a way through. That's been happening for years now. It's just suddenly we don't seem to be able to find a way through. We seem to be lost and short of ideas in the final third when that's happened, which obviously is a worry because it's turned into a trend now. It's not just 1 or 2 games. It's pretty much every game we've played against the bottom 6 this season, and some teams outside the bottom 6. That's been the case where we just look short of ideas in the final third. Against Man City, obviously, they're going to play their own way. There's going to be a lot more space. Man City's defensive record recently has been incredible, but then obviously not a defensive team. They're just a team who defends really well. So I think this game will suit Liverpool more than the likes of the Brighton one, but it's still impossible to back a Liverpool win. I think with Man City in such good form, I've maybe let my heart rule my head a little bit, but I'm going for a draw. I can't predict Liverpool to lose this game because I think it does suit them, and you'd hope Alisson would be back. You'd hope Fabinho would be back. Maybe Henderson back in midfield. If one of the new centre-back signings comes in, you'd hope Mane will be back. And suddenly, obviously the defeat to Brighton was hugely disappointing, and it was a really, really poor performance without any real attacking threat. But it has to be remembered, Liverpool were missing, half of their first choice team. And I think those are the sorts of games we're starting to see the likes of Van Dijk being missed, because his passing range from the back, just, cutting out the midfield is incredible. And obviously, when Van Dijk gets injured, you're worried about Liverpool's defensive record, but I think he offers so much more to the team in an attacking sense as well. And I think in those games, you're probably seeing it more than ever. But obviously, huge game, really difficult game. But these are usually entertaining, exciting games. Liverpool and Man City usually go toe-to-toe with each other, and there's not much between them. So I'm going for a 2-2 draw in this one.
2-2, yeah. I thought you were going to say I've gone 1-1 here. Almost went City, but yeah, I just think obviously 1-1 early this season, wasn't it? At the Etihad, Liverpool won last season at Anfield 3-1. And as you say, I think I would probably gone City if Alisson was definitely out. Obviously he was unwell, wasn't he? Not coronavirus related. It was an illness which you expect to probably be back, as you say, Fabinho and Mane. If they come back into the side for Liverpool, then suddenly it's a much better side that played last time out. And just think the Brighton game was again a weird one, wasn't it? It was a strange game. Salah, a couple of half chances. Henderson at the back is obviously he not saying he's poor at the back, but he's obviously so instrumental into what they do in, as you know well, in the middle of the park. So it's very difficult to take him out of the midfield. I think Andrew Robertson come out after the game, didn't he, and said that they're no longer in the title, well, not no longer, but they're currently not in the title race because of the gap. It's not even just the gap; it's City's form, isn't it? As you say, 13 in a row. The gap is 7 points with a game in hand. So City win this game. Very, very difficult, I think, for Liverpool to catch them, purely because it's been happened before. But City's form, it's just, as I say, unbelievable. And doing it without De Bruyne, obviously without a recognised centre forward for a lot of the time. Obviously Gabriel Jesus in and out, Aguero out at the moment. Obviously team selection for City is going to be very interesting. You fancy Sterling will play. Will Mahrez get another start in the final third? Will it be where they shuffle the pack a little bit and go Foden? You fancy Foden probably will start. He's been really good recently. Obviously Laporte played left back, didn't he, at Burnley, which was interesting because he was so good for so long, and now he's struggling to get in the side because of I think Ruben Dias has been to City what Van Dijk was for Liverpool when Van Dijk first came into the side. I thought Dias this season has been absolutely unbelievable, and it's very difficult. I think the fact if City were blowing teams away a lot of the time, you fancy that's going to end at some point, but they're just so professional at the moment. They don't concede goals. They're just very, very tough to beat. And, I think, strangely enough, United and Leicester will be hoping this is a draw. I think teams like that, they'll be hoping that City drop points, but not hoping for a Liverpool win, because Liverpool are not out of it. Liverpool win this game and suddenly get some players back, and then they're, right in it again. That race for the top four, the race for the title is going to be fascinating. Yeah, I'm hoping for a good game here. I think it will be good. Both sides will fancy they can hurt the other in the final third. But, almost City, but just 1-1 in the end.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Both sides will want an open game because it suits them, and will fancy themselves of outscoring the opposition almost, because Liverpool's front three, when they're firing and when they've got space to manoeuvre, is still one of the best. Man City without De Bruyne and Aguero, not quite the same attacking threat, but still got so many world-class players going forward. The hope, obviously, for me as a Liverpool fan is that Liverpool have performed better in the big games so far this season. Generally, beat Tottenham and West Ham recently. Those are two teams right up there. In the top half of the table, who you'd expect tougher games than maybe Burnley and Brighton, but as it turned out, the Burnley and Brighton games were the tougher. So that's the hope, that Liverpool turn up in the big game again. But we're both going for draws in that game. Rounding off the action on Sunday is Sheffield United versus Chelsea. Chelsea still unbeaten under Thomas Tuchel, still yet to concede a goal. That win over Tottenham, courtesy of the first half penalty from Jorginho, saw them go 2 wins in a row and 1 draw from Thomas Tuchel's 3 games in charge. Sheffield United, though, they're coming up against a team in decent form when they come to Sheffield United. 5 wins now from the last 7 games across all competitions. Beat West Brom, obviously, last time out in the Premier League, a big, big victory. 3 wins from their last 5 league games. Quite the turnaround, considering they're on course to be the worst Premier League team of all time not too long ago. As you mentioned earlier, it probably is just a little bit too little, too late. But they're certainly putting up a fight, and arguably will consider themselves as likely, certainly, as any of the bottom 3 to survive now. But this is a difficult game against the Chelsea side, who are looking solid, not particularly great going forward, but looking solid at the back under Thomas Tuchel. How do you see it going?
Yeah, like you say, I think, it is, they got 16 games left. Sheffield United played 22, so still a lot of points. But like you say, you're relying on going on, title winning form almost to pull themselves out, and it's not impossible by any means. But I think the win over West Brom last time out was obviously huge for them, and Billy Sharp's playing quite a lot at the moment, isn't he? He came out with a really smart finish, and still, look at that midfield, look at the side, Norwood, Lundstrom, Fleck, really good players in the middle of the park from him. Padu's been really good recently. He was really good at Old Trafford when Sheffield United went there and won. Egan, Basham, they've got good players. It's just, it hasn't happened for whatever reason. This season, the confidence wasn't there. And, say they'll go into this game feeling that they can cause Chelsea problems. But I just think Chelsea, the turnaround from Lampard, when you watch Chelsea, it was almost very disjointed, no real plan. Whereas it is the complete opposite with Thomas Tuchel. exactly what the plan is. How they're going to play. That those three centre backs and then the wing backs and the front three as well. They're going to dominate the ball. What sort of pattern of play they're going to play. I still think they're interesting to see. Timo Werner needs a goal. I think Thomas Tuchel has come out and said that he really needs to find the back of the net, because he won the penalty, didn't he, at Tottenham, but he still really needs it. It looks like Hudson-Odoi is going to get plenty of starts under Thomas Tuchel. James came into the side, didn't he, as one of the wing backs, and Marcos Alonso currently keeping Ben Chilwell out. So that's obviously a one to watch in terms of, Ziyech is struggling to get in the side at the moment. Kante was on the bench, wasn't he? Kovacic and Jorginho. So I'm interested to see whether Kante comes back into the side for this one. You expect it will be a back three again. No real surprises there. Mason Mount obviously was left out the first game, but he's worked his way back in, and not surprising. And he was, really good at Tottenham again. So this thing, it'll be a tight game. I don't think Chelsea are going to concede too many now. That they look solid at the back. That formation does help them. I think it protects especially protects Thiago Silva. As good as he is, obviously he's not fast, so he can be. I think he got exposed on a few occasions during a poor run for Chelsea, where he was left, to race against centre forwards that are obviously going to be a lot younger and a lot quicker than him. So that formation helps them, and I think they'll win again 1-0 here. I think Sheffield United, they'll huff and puff, and I think they will do their best to try and get something out. But Chelsea have improved, and they're sitting up in 6th now and eyeing that top 4, no doubt about that. So I think they'll win here 1-0.
I've gone exactly the same. I think, as we've seen so far, Chelsea haven't been pulling up any cheese going forward. They haven't been creating chances at will in these games, but they, as you mentioned, they've looked so solid at the back. And you touched on it there, the strength and depth they've got available to them. Lampard arguably didn't use all of that, because some players, the likes of Alonso, were sort of cut out of the first team picture, whereas Thomas Tuchel seems to be keen to have a look at all players, give all players a chance, which the whole squad will be delighted with. Some players yet to really get their chance under him, but I think he'll rotate quite a lot until he has a really good idea of what his first choice 11 will be. I think, as you mentioned, he knows what his first choice system is and what his preferred system will be at Chelsea, but his first choice actual 11, I think, is still very much up in the air for him, which can often be used as a criticism, obviously maybe not this early in a reign, but if you're still looking for your first choice 11 a bit further down the line. But I think in this sense it's being used well, because he's using the whole squad, he's giving everyone a chance, he's making sure everyone knows that they've got a chance to work their way into the first team, which will raise the levels in training and everything like that as well. And I think as weeks go on, he'll start settling on a 11 which he plays more often than not. But as you say, he's got so many choices in there, likes of Hakim Ziyech and Ben Chilwell, who look like some of Chelsea's better players in the first half of the season. Haven't really had much of a chance, or have lost their first team places under Thomas Tuchel, so they'll be battling to get back in. Competition for places is huge, and that can only be good for Chelsea to continue raising their standards. And I think, as you say, as soon as those attacking players start ticking, because they've got lots of them and lots of good ones as well, as soon as they start ticking, coupled with this new defensive solidity, if they can keep that, that's a really nice balance and a winning formula, and something certainly they'll feel could help them kick on towards that top 4 challenge. And they're definitely back in the race now after this recent improvement. There's a lot of talk, obviously, that the Lampard decision was harsh. It still is very early, but the very early signs are that it was maybe a shrewd decision to bring Thomas Tuchel in when he was available. Again, we'll learn more from this game, because Sheffield United pose an interesting test, which maybe Thomas Tuchel hasn't come up against in his managerial career too often before. Obviously, Burnley maybe follow a similar pattern to that in terms of their playing style to Sheffield United. But it'll be an interesting test again for Chelsea in their new era. But yeah, we're both backing them to come out on top 1-0 in this one. On Monday night, the last match of the game week is Leeds versus Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace now back-to-back wins against Wolves and Newcastle. Leeds lost to Everton last time out after beating Newcastle and Leicester before that. Another sign of the inconsistency of Leeds, really, to go and win away at high-flying Leicester and then lose at home to an Everton side who'd just been beaten by Newcastle. A disappointing result, and they just can't get any consistency going. We've mentioned it countless times on this podcast. The consistency is the issue for them. You don't really know which Leeds is going to turn up, which it's going to be frustrating. But you look at them in the table, 11th in the table, as you say, first season back in the Premier League. It's pretty good. It's okay. 10 defeats, 9 wins, 36 goals scored, 38 goals conceded. The fans, are getting entertainment, even if they don't know if they're going to turn up and lose by quite a margin. It's just a very, very difficult team to call at the moment. I am backing them to get a win in this one. I think Crystal Palace, although they've won back-to-back games, they're another of those teams who are difficult to call. These two teams not only separated by goal difference in the Premier League table at the moment, but Crystal Palace are the type of team who can, they look really devoid of ideas up front and don't look like scoring many goals one week, and then Eberechi Eze and Wilfred Zaha can turn it on the next week and they look capable of beating anyone and scoring against anyone. So they're one of those teams who are also struggling for consistency, which makes this such a difficult game to call. But I've just gone for Leeds this one. I've gone for 2-1.
Yeah, I've gone 2-1 as well.
Yeah.
2-1 Leeds. Yeah, interesting. You mentioned their table. They're in that pack, aren't they? The league table I think has taken shape as I thought it would do at this stage of the season. But they're in that pack. Leeds 11th, Palace 13th. 11 on points. Arsenal, Villa just above. Villa a game in two games in hand on a lot of clubs. You fancy if Leeds were to be almost the best of the rest in terms of where they are now. If they were finished 11th, I think it'd be a great season. And Palace, I said I don't think it'd be the end of the world. I don't think they're good enough to finish in the top 10, and they're not too good to go down. So where they are right now, 12th, maybe 11th, 12th, around there. If both clubs were in and around there, I think they'd be relatively happy with what they've done this season. And you mentioned the inconsistency. I certainly didn't have a good week in the prediction competition last week. It's just because there's so many. It's so difficult to call, isn't it, this season, more than any other. I think it's just so tough to predict what's going to happen in games. One that springs out for me, Liverpool conceding 7 at Villa, 9-0. There's a lot of weird results, Liverpool losing home to Burnley and Brighton. It's very difficult to predict what's going to happen. But yeah, I just think Leeds here, Rafinha was on the score sheet this season. He's a player that I think has been fantastic this season. 4 goals, 4 assists in the Premier League first season. And I think Leeds, Leeds fans might not be pleased to hear it, but I think they will struggle to keep him if he continues to. He's only 24, and it reminds me a little bit of Nani. First obviously went to United, a little bit erratic at times, but it's got real quality. The ball almost explodes off his foot, and he looks a real good player. And I think they'll struggle keeping. Palace have had 2 players you mentioned, obviously Easy, Zaha. They've got some really talented players and in good form, but they're just, again, they are inconsistent. Palace, so are Leeds, but I just think Leeds at home, keen to bounce back. It's very, very tight. I wouldn't be surprised to see all 3 results happen, but yeah, just Leeds 2-1.
Yeah, difficult one to call that, but both going for Leeds 2-1. All right, thank you, Matt. Myself and Matt will be back next week for our next round of predictions. So please tune back in for that. You can find previews for all of these games and many more over on sportsmile.co.uk. In the meantime, you can also subscribe to this podcast on all the usual channels and on YouTube to make sure you don't miss an episode. But as I say, we'll be back next week for our next round of predictions. So we look forward to seeing you then.